Emperor Time was not a burst of power. It was a state where every function of his Nen system operated simultaneously. The cost was measured in hours of life, not energy. Kurapika knew this. He maintained it anyway. The anomaly appeared 3 hours into sustained activation. Not a warp breach, not a summoning. Simply a space where Nen refused to behave as it should. The air tasted wrong. Electromagnetic. Metallic in a way that had nothing to do with blood. He tried to disengage Emperor Time. His body did not respond. The Nen around him was no longer his own frequency. It vibrated against a reality that operated on different rules. Two waveforms trying to occupy the same space. Incompatible. Destructive. Physics made the only choice available. The transition was not violent. No light, no sound. Just the sensation of being in one place, then another, with nothing in between. His consciousness flickered. When it stabilized, he was falling. Not through air, through ash. The impact should have broken bones. Instead, Nen absorbed most of the force, distributing it through his already exhausted system. He landed in a crouch, one hand touching ground that was still hot. Not metaphorically, actually radiating heat. Kurapika stood slowly. His shoulder protested. Something had gone wrong during the transition. His left arm hung slightly lower than it should. Dislocated, possibly. Not broken. He could work with that. The landscape extended in every direction without variation. Ash, metal, the skeletal remains of structures too massive to have been residential. Industrial architecture melted and fused into abstract shapes by temperatures he could not estimate. The sky was the color of infected wounds. He took 3 steps before his knees buckled. Not injury, recognition. Nen reacted to suffering. It was one of the first lessons. Strong emotions, particularly those tied to death and trauma, left residue that sensitive users could detect. The Kurta had called it the weight of the departed. The sensation of standing in a place where too many had died too quickly. This was not residue. This was a mountain. Billions. Not metaphor. The actual count pressed against his consciousness like physical mass. Men, women, children who had not yet learned to speak, the elderly, the sick, those who had tried to hide, those who had tried to run, those who had done nothing but exist in the wrong place when the judgment came. All of them, gone in the same moment. Kurapika's eyes burned. Scarlet spread across his irises without his permission. Emperor Time was not active. He had released it during the transition. But the scarlet eyes did not care about his intentions. They responded to one thing only: genocide. He forced himself to his feet, breathing carefully. The air was thin, radiation probably, low level but present. His Nen created a barrier, automatically filtering out the worst of it. Not perfect. He could feel contamination seeping through. His body would handle it for now. Later would be a problem for later. He walked. Direction did not matter. Every direction was the same: ash and twisted metal and the overwhelming silence of a world that had been sterilized. Not conquered, not invaded, erased. After 20 minutes, he found the first corpse. It was fused to the metal beneath it. Carbonized. Features obliterated by heat that had turned human tissue into charcoal and mineral deposits. He could not tell if it had been male or female, adult or child. The only identifying feature was a hand, partially preserved, reaching toward nothing. Kurapika knelt beside it. This was not war. War implied combatants, objectives, territory exchanged between factions who considered themselves in conflict. This was administrative. A decision made in an office transmitted through channels executed by people who had never seen the world they destroyed. Efficiency over morality, numbers over names. He recognized the pattern. The Kurta clan had been 47 people. Their village had been isolated, remote, defenseless. The phantom troop had killed them for their eyes, rare, valuable, collectible. 47 people had died so that 9 could profit. Here billions had died so that what resources could be reclaimed, threats could be neutralized, heresy could be purged. He did not know the word they had used, but he knew the mechanism. No one will remember them. His voice sounded wrong in the dead air, too small, too human. The hand remained frozen in its eternal reach. Kurapika stood, looked at the horizon where more ruins waited, more corpses, more evidence of calculations mistaken for necessity. He understood something then. The people who had done this were not monsters. Monsters could be hunted. Monsters could be killed. The people who had done this were a system, and systems did not bleed. The ruins had been a city once. Kurapika could tell by the density of the wreckage. Hab blocks, he would later learn, they were called. Housing units stacked 50 stories high, packed with workers who lived and died without ever seeing open sky. Now, they were tombstones. He found the ritual site 3 kilometers from where he had landed. The ash gave way to scorched stone, and the stone gave way to symbols. Carved deep, painted in substances he did not want to identify. The geometry hurt to look at. Not because it was complex, but because it was wrong. Angles that should not connect. Curves that bent in directions space did not permit. His nen recoiled, not from danger, from incompatibility. Whatever had been attempted here operated on principles that his power system could not interface with. Like trying to breathe underwater. The mechanics were simply not designed for the environment. Kurapika circled the ritual site carefully. The symbols were recent. Hours old, perhaps. The blood used in their creation had not fully dried despite the heat. Around the perimeter, bodies lay in precise formations. Sacrifices, he realized. Not killed in panic or combat. Arranged deliberately, hundreds of them. The ritual had failed. He could tell by the way the symbols terminated. Incomplete. The final binding had never been drawn. Something had interrupted the process before it could finish. That interruption had killed everyone present. Not the ritual's failure. Something else. Something that had arrived after the cultists began their work, but before they could complete it. A third party that had evaluated the situation and made a decision. Cleanse everything. Kurapika knelt beside one of the bodies. Male, middle-aged, hands calloused from manual labor. The marks on his skin suggested chemical burns and malnutrition. A worker, then. Someone who had lived in the hab blocks above. Someone who had been promised something better than the life he had. The cultists had used him. The Imperium had killed him. Neither had asked his name. You were trying to survive. The words came out quieter than he intended. The dead man did not answer. Kurapika stood looking across the hundreds of other bodies. All workers. All desperate. All dead. The ones who had performed the ritual and the ones who had ended it were nowhere to be found. The orchestrators had escaped or been vaporized. Only the victims remained preserved by the same heat that had sterilized the world. Evidence. but evidence of what that people would do terrible things, when given no other options, that those in power would destroy entire populations to prevent the spread of ideas they deemed dangerous. He already knew both of those things. His shoulder throbbed. The dislocation was getting worse. He needed to set it soon or risk permanent damage. But there was no clean surface, no stable structure, no running water, just ash and bodies and the lingering radiation that his nen could filter but not eliminate. Kurapika found a section of wall that had remained relatively intact, braced himself against it, took 3 careful breaths, then slammed his shoulder into the metal. The joint popped back into place with a sound like breaking wood. He did not scream. The Kurta had trained their children to endure pain in silence. Screaming attracted predators. Silence meant survival. Instead, he closed his eyes and focused on breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Controlled, measured. The pain was information, his body telling him that damage had occurred and repairs were necessary. He acknowledged it, filed it away, continued functioning. When he opened his eyes again, they were still red. The scarlet eyes should have faded by now. Emperor Time was not active. There was no combat, no immediate threat. But the eyes remained responding to something deeper than stimulus. They were reacting to the place itself, to the accumulated weight of so many deaths occurring simultaneously, to the industrial scale of the extinction, to the casual efficiency with which an entire world had been rendered uninhabitable. This was not the first world, he realized. This was not an aberration. This was procedure. Somewhere in an office he would never see, someone had filed a report, recommended a course of action, received approval from a superior who had never set foot on this planet. The order had been transmitted through channels, executed by people who considered it a duty. No one had hesitated. No one had questioned. No one had looked at the billions of lives below and wondered if there might be another way. They had simply done what the system required. Kurapika walked away from the ritual site. His shoulder ached. His body was accumulating damage faster than his nen could repair it. The radiation was beginning to affect his cellular structure. He could feel it. A heaviness in his bones. A sluggishness in his blood. He would need to find shelter soon, water if any remained. Food, though he doubted anything edible had survived the purge. But first he needed to understand where he was. Because if this world was one of many, if this kind of extinction was common practice, if the system that enabled it was still operational, then the Kurta clan's fate was not unique. It was replicated, systematized, industrialized across an entire galaxy. And Kurapika needed to know if anyone remembered the names. Kurapika found water in the 4th structure he searched. Not clean. Contaminated with particulates and trace elements his body would struggle to process. But wet. His nen could filter some of the toxins. Not all. Enough. He drank slowly, small sips. His throat was raw from breathing the polluted air. The water burned going down, but his cells needed the hydration more than they needed comfort. Survival was not about optimal conditions. It was about acceptable compromises. While he drank, he studied the walls. They told a story, not in words, in layers. Paint, graffiti, burn marks. The archaeology of human habitation compressed into vertical strata. At the bottom, institutional colors. Gray, brown. The palette of efficiency. Higher up, personal touches. Names. Crude drawings. Evidence that people had tried to make this place a home. At the very top, newest, the symbols. 8-pointed stars, spirals that bent wrong. Words in a language he did not recognize, but that made his teeth ache when he looked at them too long. Propaganda, he realized. Recruitment material. Promises written by people who understood desperation and how to weaponize it. The workers had been trying to escape. Not physically. There was nowhere to go. But mentally, spiritually, they had been offered something better than grinding poverty and early death. They had accepted without understanding the cost. The Imperium had discovered the infection, calculated the spread, determined that containment was impossible, made their decision. One world. Billions of people. Acceptable loss. They did not even try. His voice echoed in the empty hab. Kurapika set down the water container, looked at the names painted on the walls. Maria, Tolan, Sarkin, dozens more. People who had existed, who had mattered to someone, who were now ash and vapor and lingering radiation. No one would investigate what happened here. No one would compile a list of the dead. No one would hold a ceremony or plant a memorial or remember that these people had names. The world would be marked as cleansed in some database. The sector would continue operations. Resources would be redirected. New workers would be born on other worlds to replace the lost productivity. The machine would continue. Kurapika's hand tightened on the water container. The metal creaked. His nen spiked involuntarily, responding to emotions as he was trying to keep controlled. Anger. Grief. Recognition. The Phantom Troop had killed for profit. The Imperium killed for order. Different motivations, same result. People erased, memories destroyed, suffering quantified and filed away as acceptable. He forced himself to breathe. In, out, controlled. The nen spike subsided. His scarlet eyes remained active, but their glow dimmed slightly. Not enough. They were draining him. Each moment they remained engaged was lifespan. He would not recover. But they would not deactivate while he stood in this monument to efficient extinction. A sound. Distant, mechanical. Kurapika moved to the opening that had once held a window. The glass was gone, melted or shattered during the purge. He looked out across the wasted landscape. Movement. 4 figures. Humanoid. Wearing patchwork armor and carrying weapons that seemed cobbled together from scavenged parts. They were searching the ruins. Looking for something. Survivors of the ritual, he realized. Cultists who had not been present during the exterminatus, returning to salvage what they could, or perhaps to complete what had been interrupted. Kurapika watched them work. Efficient, organized. They knew what they were looking for. One carried a device that emitted a faint green light. A scanner of some kind. Another marked locations with symbols sprayed from a canister. They were not mourning. They were cataloging. These were not victims. These were the architects. The ones who had convinced the workers to participate in the ritual. The ones who had promised salvation and delivered damnation. The ones who had escaped while their converts burned. Kurapika's right hand moved to his side. Chains materialized. Not full manifestation, just enough to feel their weight, their potential. He could reach the cultists from here, incapacitate them, extract information about where he was, what had happened, how to leave. He could also kill them. It would be easy. They were unaware, focused on their salvage operation. He was trained to kill efficiently, silently. The chains could pierce their skulls before they understood what was happening. 4 lives. 4 people who had facilitated mass murder. 4 executions that could be justified as justice. His fingers flexed. Not yet. The word surprised him. Not the decision. The fact that he had spoken it aloud. As if he needed to hear himself commit to restraint. As if the temptation required vocalization to resist. The cure to revenge was personal. Specific. The phantom troop had faces, names, individual responsibility for individual crimes. Kurapika hunted them because they had made the choice to kill his people, not as policy, not as procedure, as deliberate murder. These cultists were different. They were part of a system. Remove them and the system would recruit replacements. Kill them and nothing would change. The machine that had destroyed this world would continue operating. The mechanism that normalized genocide would remain intact. Kurapika needed to understand the machine before he could break it. He needed to know if it could be broken at all. The cultists finished their survey. One spoke into a communication device, a language Kurapika did not know, harsh, guttural, religious fervor bleeding through the phonetics. After a moment they departed, moving with purpose toward the ritual site he had discovered earlier. Kurapika waited until they were out of sight. Then he followed. His shoulder ached. His body was accumulating damage. The radiation was winning its slow war against his cellular structure. His Nen reserves were depleting faster than they should because the Scarlet Eyes refused to deactivate. None of it mattered. He had found the thread. Now he would follow it until he understood the pattern. Or until his body gave out. Whichever came first. The cultists moved with purpose but without caution. They believed the world was dead. Believed themselves alone among the ruins. Kurapika used that assumption. He followed at a distance that would have been impossible to maintain without training. Hunter Academy taught pursuit as both science and art. Stay beyond peripheral vision. Move when they move. Freeze when they stop. Breathe with their rhythm so no sound breaks the pattern. His injured shoulder complicated the technique. Each movement sent sharp feedback through his nervous system. He acknowledged it. Compensated. Continued. They led him deeper into the hive's corpse. The architecture changed. Residential gave way to industrial. Manufactorums he would learn later. Facilities where workers had spent their lives producing goods they would never own. The machinery was still present. Massive, skeletal, frozen in whatever operation had been interrupted by the purge. The cultists stopped at a loading bay. One of them activated a portable light source. Harsh, chemical. It threw shadows that moved wrong across the walls. In the illumination, Kurapika saw what they had come for. Crates. Dozens of them. Marked with symbols he recognized from the ritual site. Chaos iconography. These were not scavenged supplies. This was a cache. Pre-positioned. The ritual had been planned. The cultists had prepared for success. For expansion. For what came after. The exterminatus had interrupted procurement. One of the cultists pried open a crate. Inside weapons. Not improvised. Manufactured. Mass-produced in some facility that operated beyond Imperial oversight. The weapons were distributed. 4 became 8. 8 became 12 as each cultist took multiple armaments. They were preparing for something. Not salvage, not retreat. Continuation. Kurapika stepped from cover. Stop. The word was quiet, precise. It carried across the loading bay with unnatural clarity. The cultists spun. Weapons rose. In the chemical light, Kurapika saw their faces clearly for the first time. Young. All of them. No older than he was. Scarred. Malnourished. eyes that had seen too much and believed too little. These were not monsters. They were survivors who had made terrible choices because all other choices had been taken from them. It did not matter. "You used them," Kurapika said. His voice remained level, controlled. "The workers, the families in the Habs. You convinced them the ritual would save them. You knew it would not." The cultist with the scanner spoke. His accent was thick, words shaped by a mouth that had learned to speak in environments where air was rationed. "They were dying anyway. We offered meaning. You offered lies. We offered hope." The cultist's grip on his weapon tightened. Not aggression, desperation. "The Imperium gave them nothing. We gave them purpose, choice, a chance to matter." Kurapika's chains materialized fully. They coiled around his right arm, responsive, waiting. The cultists saw them and their formation changed. Trained, coordinated. They had fought before, survived before. "You gave them death," Kurapika said. "The Imperium's crime does not absolve yours." The scanner cultist's expression hardened. Recognition, understanding that negotiation had failed before it began. Fire. 12 weapons discharged simultaneously. Not projectiles. Light. Coherent. Concentrated energy beams that struck with the sound of tearing fabric and the smell of ozone and burning meat. Kurapika moved. Not fast enough. One beam caught his already injured shoulder. The pain was immediate. Catastrophic. Not heat, something worse. Molecular disruption. The weapon was designed to flash boil the water in human tissue. His Nen barrier absorbed most of the impact. Most. Not all. His shoulder opened. Not bleeding, cauterized. The flesh was cooked, sealed, damaged in ways that would not heal properly even with Nen reinforcement. He landed behind a support column. The barrage continued. 12 weapons. Sustained fire. The column was metal. Industrial grade. It began to glow where the beams concentrated. Would fail soon. Seconds, not minutes. Kurapika analyzed. 12 targets, coordinated, armed with weapons that could penetrate his Nen barrier with sufficient concentration. His shoulder was compromised. Movement limited. Pain signals interfering with fine motor control. Acceptable parameters. He extended his chain, not toward the cultists, toward the crates. The tip struck the nearest container, embedded. He pulled. The crate slid, crashed into 2 cultists who were advancing to flank his position. They stumbled. Firing arcs disrupted. Kurapika moved during the disruption, not toward the cultists, toward the darkness beyond the light. They tracked him, fired. Beams scored the floor where he had been, where he was. One grazed his left leg. Superficial, painful. He ignored it. From darkness, he observed, the cultists were regrouping, tightening formation. One shouted orders in that harsh language. The others responded with military precision. They had training, real training, not improvised. Systematic. Someone had taught them to fight as a unit. Kurapika's chain struck from the shadows, not to kill, to disable. The tip wrapped around a cultist's weapon, yanked. The gun discharged wildly as it was torn free. The beam struck another cultist, not lethal. The angle was wrong, but painful, disorienting. 2 down, 10 active. The odds were improving. "Spread out," the scanner cultist commanded. "Overlapping fields. He cannot hide from 12 angles." Smart, tactically sound. If they maintained formation and forced him into the open, the concentrated fire would overwhelm his barrier. His nen was already strained. The scarlet eyes were still active, still draining him. His reserves were finite. Kurapika needed to break their coordination. He threw his voice. A technique learned during training. Projection, misdirection, made it seem like he was behind them when he was to their left. 3 cultists turned, fired at nothing. Wasted energy. Created gaps. He struck through the gaps. Chain jail would not work here. These were not the Phantom Troop. The conditions were not met. But the chains themselves were weapons. Flexible, precise. He used them like a surgeon used a scalpel, targeting hands. Weapons, disabling rather than killing. Another cultist fell, weapons spinning away into darkness. His hand was intact, but useless. The chain had wrapped around the tendons, crushed them, controlled, calculated, 9 active. The scanner cultist was shouting now, not orders. Panic bleeding through training. They were losing, slowly, methodically, against a single opponent they could not see, could not predict, could not kill. Kurapika permitted himself a moment of tactical satisfaction. Then the wall exploded, not metaphor, actual explosion, shaped charge, breach protocol. The loading bay filled with smoke and light and armored figures that moved with inhuman speed and precision. New players, heavier armor, better weapons. They were not here for the cultists. They were here for anything that had survived. Kurapika's scarlet eyes flared brighter. His nen spiked. The pain in his shoulder became white noise. The hunters had become the hunted. The armored figures were not Imperial Guard. Their armor was wrong. Patchwork. Scavenged ceramite plates bolted to flak vests. Chaos iconography scratched into the surface. Hastily applied. Recent converts, not long-term cultists. But their weapons were real, military grade, and they knew how to use them. The cultists Kurapika had been fighting scattered. Some returned fire. Others ran for the crates, trying to arm themselves better, trying to survive. The newcomers cut them down with methodical precision. No hesitation, no mercy. Kurapika remained in the shadows, analyzing. 12 cultists, 9 still combat capable, 6 armored hostiles, plus 1 more entering through the breach last, larger, moving differently. The armor was not scavenged, it was fitted, genuine. Chaos-blessed ceramite that pulsed with energy Kurapika's senses recognized as fundamentally wrong. A champion. The leader. The champion raised one hand. The firefight stopped. Not because of an order, because of presence. Authority that did not require words. The armored figures lowered their weapons fractionally. The surviving cultists froze. 8 days, the champion said. His voice was amplified by the helmet, distorted. But the accent underneath was cultured, educated. This had been someone important before the conversion. 8 days since the Imperium burned our world. You return for weapons, the scanner cultist stepped forward. Brave or foolish? Perhaps both. We return to continue the work. The ritual failed, but the cause remains. The cause died with 3 billion faithful. The champion's helmet turned, scanning the loading bay. You should have died with them. We were gathering components. We were not present when. You ran, cold, factual, condemning, while others burned you, prioritized survival. The scanner cultist's weapon trembled. We can still fight. We have resources. We can... The champion moved. Faster than something that size should move. One hand caught the scanner cultist by the throat, lifted him. The cultist's feet kicked empty air. "You have nothing," the champion said. "This world is ash. Our infrastructure is gone. Our recruits are dead. Our purpose is ended." Kurapika watched the cultist's face turn purple, watched the others step back. None intervened. Fear or pragmatism, the result was identical. The champion was going to kill him, not for betrayal, not for failure, for the simple fact that resources were finite and mouths to feed were wasteful. Kurapika's chains extended. The champion's head snapped toward him, still holding the cultist. The helmet's eye lenses glowed with something that was not reflected light. "Another survivor," the champion observed. "Interesting." The chain wrapped around the champion's wrist, not to harm, to force release. Kurapika pulled. The champion did not budge. Superhuman strength, enhanced by armor and whatever corruption flowed through his veins. But leverage was physics, not power. Kurapika altered the angle, used the champion's own grip as a fulcrum. The armor joint locked. Servo motors whined in protest. The champion's fingers opened reflexively to prevent structural damage. The scanner cultist fell, gasped, scrambled backward. "You are not Imperial," the champion said. Curious, not threatened. "Xenos mutant. Human. No human moves like that." Kurapika did not reply. His injured shoulder was screaming. The chain manipulation had torn partially healed tissue. Fresh damage layered on top of cauterized wounds. His nen was compensating, but the reserves were dropping critically low. The champion studied him, then gestured. The armored figures raised their weapons. Not at Kurapika, at the remaining cultists. "Kill them." "Wait," the scanner cultist started. The armored figures fired. Mass reactive rounds, designed to penetrate then detonate. The cultists died quickly, efficiently. Their bodies collapsed in spreading pools that steamed in the chemical light. Kurapika's chains tensed. The champion noticed. "You object? They were your people. They were liabilities." The champion stepped over a corpse without looking down. "This world is dead. I have 6 loyal soldiers and finite ammunition. Every additional mouth is a resource drain I cannot afford. So you execute them. I make practical decisions." The champion's helmet tilted. "You disagree. You who disabled rather than killed, who held back when you could have ended them cleanly." Kurapika said nothing. The observation was accurate. He had chosen to disable, to preserve, to maintain the possibility of justice rather than summary execution. "You are weak," the champion concluded, "sentimental. These are fatal flaws in a dead universe." "I am precise," Kurapika corrected. His voice remained level despite the pain radiating from his shoulder. "You kill because it is convenient. I kill when it is necessary. There is a difference." The champion laughed. The sound echoed wrong in his helmet. Mechanical. Distorted by whatever modifications had been made to his physiology. Necessary. Convenient. Philosophy for corpses. He turned fully toward Kurapika. This world was purged because the Imperium deemed it necessary. I serve chaos because it is convenient. Your distinction is meaningless. "You did not give the order," Kurapika said quietly. "You only followed it." The champion went still. For 3 seconds. 5. The armored figures shifted nervously. Then the champion moved. Not toward Kurapika, toward his own soldiers. One hand shot out, grabbed the nearest armored figure by the helmet. Twisted. The ceramite cracked. The figure collapsed. "I give the orders now," the champion said. His voice was different, angry, defensive. "I am not some servitor following programming. I chose this path. I chose conversion. I chose to burn the weak and serve the strong." "You chose after the system gave you no other options," Kurapika observed. "You chose because remaining loyal meant dying with the faithful. You chose survival disguised as conviction." The remaining 5 armored figures were backing away, slowly, trying not to draw attention. The champion was radiating something now. Warp energy, uncontrolled. His anger was bleeding into reality. "You know nothing about my choices. I know you are trying to convince yourself they mattered," the champion roared. No words, just rage. He charged, not tactical, not controlled. Pure fury given physical form. Kurapika waited until the champion committed, until momentum made course correction impossible. Then he moved, not away, toward, sliding under the champion's guard, too close for the armored fists to generate force. His chains wrapped around the champion's legs, both of them, found the servo joints, the weak points where armor segments connected. Kurapika pulled. The champion crashed forward. 300 kilograms of armor and corruption hitting the floor with enough force to crack the metal plating. He tried to rise. Servos whined. The chains had twisted the joints, locked them. The armor had become a prison. Kurapika knelt beside the champion's helmet. His own breathing was labored. Blood was seeping through his jacket from the shoulder wound. His Nen reserves were nearly depleted. "You followed orders," he said quietly. "Then you gave them. The role changed. The mechanism did not." The champion struggled, failed. The armor would not respond, not without functional joints. "What are you? Someone who understands the difference between the system and the people it destroys." Kurapika stood. The 5 remaining soldiers had fled during the confrontation. Smart. He looked down at the champion, trapped, helpless, alive. "I could kill you," Kurapika said. "You would call it mercy or justice, depending on your perspective. I call it wasteful." He turned, walked toward the breach in the wall. His body was failing. The radiation, the wounds, the Nen depletion. He needed to find shelter, water, time to recover. Behind him, the champion shouted something, threats or philosophy. Kurapika did not listen. He had learned what he needed to learn. The system created victims and perpetrators in equal measure. Breaking one did not break the other. He needed to find the source. Kurapika made it 17 steps before the air changed. Not temperature, not pressure. Something underneath reality. A wrongness that made his teeth ache and his vision blur at the edges. He stopped, turned. A figure stood in the breach, robed, thin to the point of emaciation. The fabric it wore was not cloth, skin, tattooed with symbols that moved when observed directly. The figure's face was hidden beneath a hood, but its hands were visible. Too many fingers, too many joints. A sorcerer. "Interesting," the figure said. Its voice was layered, multiple tones speaking simultaneously. "You damaged my champion. Restrained rather than killed. Mercy or arrogance." Kurapika's hand moved to his side. The chains materialized, slower than they should. His Nen was depleted, dangerously so. "Precision," he replied. The sorcerer laughed. The sound made the air vibrate. Behind it, something moved, not in the physical space, in the layer beneath. The dimension where Nen could not reach. Precision implies control, the sorcerer said. You are barely standing. Your energy reserves are critical. Your body is failing. What control remains? Kurapika did not answer. The sorcerer was correct. His shoulder was bleeding freely now. His leg wound had reopened during the fight with the champion. The radiation damage was accelerating. His cells were dying faster than they could regenerate. And his Nen was nearly gone. I offer you a choice, the sorcerer continued. Its too many-fingered hands spread wide. Serve. Accept the gifts of the true powers. Your strength would be restored. Your wounds healed. Your potential unlimited. No. The word was immediate. Absolute. The sorcerer's head tilted. You refuse without consideration. I have seen what your gifts cost. The Imperium's purge was not our doing. We offered salvation. They chose genocide. You offered corruption. Kurapika corrected. The Imperium's crime does not make yours virtuous. The sorcerer's hands lowered. The air grew heavier, thicker. Reality was bending around the figure. Probability was becoming negotiable. Then you choose death. How tedious. The sorcerer's hand moved, drew a symbol in the air. The symbol persisted, glowing, wrong. Where it existed, space folded, opened. Something pressed through from the other side, small, perhaps a meter tall, composed of geometries that should not fit together, angles that stabbed at sanity. It had too many limbs and not enough mass, and its presence made Kurapika's Nen recoil instinctively. A demon, minor, freshly manifested, but real. It moved toward him, fast, inhuman, its limbs bent in directions that defied skeletal structure. Kurapika's chains lashed out, struck the creature, passed through it, no contact. The demon existed partially in another dimension. Physical attacks could not reach it fully. The demon's limb extended, touched Kurapika's chest, not contact, violation. Its essence tried to force its way inside, to occupy the same space, to corrupt from within. Kurapika's Nen barrier held. Barely. The strain was immense. His reserves dropped further. The demon pushed harder. Its presence was acidic, dissolving the barrier molecule by molecule. He was going to lose. Not acceptable. Emperor Time. The activation was not gradual. It was instantaneous. Total. Every aspect of his Nen system engaged simultaneously. His aura exploded outward. Not visible light, but pressure. Reality asserting itself against the intrusion. The demon recoiled, confused. It existed in the space between dimensions. Kurapika's Nen was forcing that space to collapse, to become singular, physical. The creature became solid, fully material, vulnerable. Kurapika's chain pierced its center mass. The demon shrieked, dissolved, its essence scattered. The manifestation failed. The sorcerer's hands moved faster, drawing more symbols, chanting in a language that was not meant for human vocal cords. Another demon began to form, larger, more stable. Kurapika's heart stuttered, not metaphor, actual arrhythmia. Emperor Time was consuming his life at an accelerated rate. His cardiovascular system was failing to maintain the energy output his Nen demanded. His heart skipped beats, struggled, compensated. He had minutes, perhaps less. The second demon manifested, lunged. Kurapika dodged, slower than he should. His body was not responding correctly. The neurological feedback was degrading. Emperor Time was burning through his system too fast. Chain jail. The chains extended, wrapped around the demon. It struggled. The chains held. Not through strength, through principle. Chain jail was designed to bind, to restrain, to create a space where escape was impossible. The warp energy around the demon diminished, cut off, isolated. The creature's form destabilized without the constant influx of corruption. It took 7 seconds. Then it dissipated. Kurapika's vision darkened at the edges. His heart was struggling. The rhythm was wrong. Too fast, then too slow. His Nen was trying to compensate, but Emperor Time was demanding more energy than his body could provide. The sorcerer was preparing a third summoning, hands weaving patterns that hurt to perceive. Kurapika could feel it. Bigger, stronger, something he could not bind or dismiss. He had one option. Kurapika moved, not toward the demon, toward the sorcerer. His chains extended. The sorcerer raised a hand. Warp energy formed a barrier. The chain struck it, held, could not penetrate. But Kurapika was not trying to pierce the barrier. He was using it as an anchor. He pulled, used the barrier's stability to launch himself forward, over it. His remaining Nen concentrated in his legs. One jump, all the strength he had left. He cleared the barrier, landed in front of the sorcerer. Close, too close for rituals, too close for summoning, close enough to kill. His hand struck, not a chain, a simple blow, enhanced by the last dregs of his Emperor Time, aimed at the throat, precise, controlled. The sorcerer's neck shattered. The chanting stopped. The summoning collapsed. The forming demon screamed, half manifested. It tore itself apart, trying to exist without an anchor. The sorcerer fell. Its too many-fingered hands clutched uselessly at its ruined throat. Its layered voice tried to form words, failed, died. Kurapika collapsed beside it. His heart was failing, actually failing. Not metaphor, not exaggeration. The muscle was seizing. The rhythm was chaotic. Emperor Time had pushed his cardiovascular system past its tolerances. He forced the deactivation, emergency shutdown, cut the Nen flow, stopped the technique before it stopped him. His aura vanished. The pressure disappeared. He was just human again, injured, dying, alone in a dead world surrounded by corpses. His heart struggled, found a rhythm, wrong, unstable, but functional. He breathed, in, out, slow, controlled, giving his body time to stabilize, to remember how to function without the artificial enhancement. Minutes passed. His vision cleared slightly. The arrhythmia decreased. His heart was damaged, permanently, but beating. Kurapika looked at his hands. They were shaking, not from fear, from cellular exhaustion. His body had been pushed past its limits. Recovery would take weeks, maybe longer, if he survived that long. He stood, slowly. Everything hurt. His shoulder, his leg, his chest, his heart. But he was standing. The sorcerer's corpse stared at nothing. The champion was still trapped in his armor prison. The cultists were dead. The demon residue was fading. Kurapika had won. It felt like losing. He walked toward the exit. Each step was deliberate, measured, his body threatening to collapse if he moved too quickly. Behind him, the loading bay was silent. Another battlefield. Another victory that meant nothing. He needed to find a way out, before this world took what little remained. Kurapika found shelter in what had been a water reclamation facility. The machinery was dead, melted in places. But the structure had thick walls, radiation shielding built into the architecture. Not perfect, better than nothing. He collapsed against a wall, allowed himself 5 minutes of stillness. His body needed rest, needed medical attention, needed weeks of recovery in a controlled environment with clean water and proper nutrition. He had none of those things. The shoulder wound had stopped bleeding, not through healing, through coagulation and the cauterization the lasgun had provided. The tissue was dead, would need to be debrided eventually. For now, it was sealed. Infected, probably, but sealed. His leg was manageable. Superficial damage. The radiation was the real problem. He could feel it. Cumulative. Building in his bone marrow. His cells were replicating incorrectly. Mutations at the genetic level. His nen was trying to repair the damage, but without reserves, the effort was minimal. And his heart. Kurapika placed his hand on his chest, felt the rhythm, irregular, skipping, compensating. The muscle had been damaged by the strain of Emperor Time, scarred. The electrical signals that coordinated contractions were misfiring, creating dead zones where the tissue would not respond. He would live, probably, but the heart would never be the same. Emperor Time was no longer a tool. It was a loaded weapon pointed at his own head. One more activation might be the last. He closed his eyes, breathed carefully. His mind was racing despite his body's exhaustion, processing, analyzing, reconstructing the pattern. 3 billion people, one world. Exterminatus. This was not unique. The realization settled over him like ash. Heavy, suffocating, undeniable. This universe operated on a scale where worlds were expendable, where populations were statistics, where genocide was policy. The Imperium had not hesitated, had not investigated alternatives, had seen corruption and responded with total erasure. Because corruption was worse than extinction. That was the equation. The fundamental calculus that drove every decision. Chaos contamination could spread, could infect other worlds, could compromise entire sectors. Therefore, the infected world must be destroyed. Completely, permanently. No exceptions, no survivors, no mercy. The logic was sound. From a certain perspective, if corruption truly was infinite and unstoppable, if the only choice was between one world or 1,000, then the decision became mathematical. Sacrifice the few to save the many. Kurapika had heard that reasoning before, from the Hunter Association, from military strategists, from politicians who sent others to die for the greater good. He had always rejected it, because the few had names, families, lives that mattered beyond their strategic value, because reducing people to numbers was how atrocities became acceptable, how murder became policy. But here in this universe, the scale was different. Not thousands, billions, trillions across countless worlds. The Imperium was not a nation. It was a species trying to survive in a galaxy that wanted humanity extinct. The threats were real, existential. The corruption was not metaphor. It was literal. Spiritual infection that turned people into weapons against themselves. In that context, what was the alternative Kurapika did not know. And that ignorance terrified him more than the combat, more than the wounds, more than the radiation slowly killing him from inside. Because if the Imperium's logic was sound, if extinction truly was the only response to corruption, then justice became impossible, accountability became irrelevant, the system became self-justifying, and Kurapika's mission became meaningless. The Kurta clan had been 47 people, murdered for profit, individual crimes by individual perpetrators who could be hunted, judged, held accountable. But 3 billion people had died here, not by individuals, by system, by policy, by institutional decision made in offices far from the consequences. Who did he hold accountable for that? The officer who gave the order? The captain who fired the weapon? The administrator who filed the report? The system that made such orders routine, all of them? None of them. The machine that enabled the killing was too large, too distributed, too essential to the survival of the species it claimed to protect. Kurapika opened his eyes, looked at his hands. They were still shaking, cellular damage, exhaustion, but also something else. Fear, not of death. He had accepted that possibility long ago. Fear of becoming what he hunted, of looking at suffering and calling it necessary, of making calculations where lives became numbers and murder became mathematics. If he stayed here, if he tried to fight this system, if he continued hunting perpetrators in a universe where everyone was complicit, he would have to make those calculations too. Would have to decide which deaths were acceptable, which crimes could be ignored, which horrors were simply the cost of survival. He would become the thing he swore to destroy. His eyes burned. The scarlet activation was involuntary, responding to his emotional state, to the weight of understanding, to the recognition that some systems were too large to fight without becoming corrupted by them. The red faded slowly. His nen was too depleted to maintain it, but the fact that it had activated at all was concerning. Emperor Time was threatening to engage. His body was trying to prepare for combat that was not happening. The technique was destabilizing, responding to stress instead of intention. If it activated without his control, it would kill him. His heart could not survive another session. The damage was too severe. Kurapika needed to leave. Not just this facility, this world, this universe. He needed to return before the choice became impossible, before he was forced to decide between death and compromise, before survival required him to accept the unacceptable. But he did not know how. The transition here had been accident. Nen phase displacement. Two incompatible realities rejecting each other. He could not replicate it intentionally, could not force his nen to destabilize in exactly the right way. Unless Emperor Time, if he activated it fully, pushed his nen beyond safe parameters, created the same kind of reality rejection that had brought him here. The phase displacement might reverse, might send him back, or it might kill him. Probably both. Kurapika sat in the dead facility, his heart beating its damaged rhythm, his body slowly dying from radiation and infection and exhaustion, his mind racing through possibilities that all ended the same way. Stay and become corrupted. Leave and probably die trying. Neither option was acceptable. Both were inevitable. He needed to decide soon. His body would not last much longer. The radiation was accelerating. The infections were spreading. His nen reserves were not recovering properly. Every hour decreased his chances of survival. Not yet. The words echoed in the empty facility. A promise or a prayer. Kurapika was not sure which. He stood, slowly, his body protesting every movement. He needed to find supplies, water that was less contaminated, something to treat the infections, materials to stabilize his shoulder. He needed to buy time. Then he would decide whether to use it dying slowly or dying quickly, both for a chance to go home. Kurapika found water in a storage tank 3 levels below the reclamation facility. Stagnant, filled with particulates and biological contaminants, but wet. His nen filtered what it could. He drank slowly, rationing, knowing this might be the last clean source he would find. The infection in his shoulder was spreading. He could feel it. Heat, swelling, the characteristic throb of tissue fighting bacterial invasion. Without antibiotics, his immune system would have to manage alone, weakened by radiation, by exhaustion, by the cumulative damage of combat. His odds were not favorable. He found fabric in an abandoned locker, synthetic, heat-resistant. He tore it into strips, bound his shoulder tight. Compression would not cure infection, but it would limit movement, prevent further tearing. Small victories. His leg he left alone. The wound was shallow, already scabbing. His body could handle it. The heart was beyond his ability to treat. Damaged muscle could not be bandaged. Electrical misfires could not be compressed. He could only limit strain, avoid exertion, hope the scarring did not worsen. Hope was a limited resource. Kurapika sat in the darkness of the storage level, conserving energy. His nen was recovering, slowly, inadequately. The reserves were building, but the rate was wrong, inefficient, as if his power system itself had been damaged by the phase displacement, by operating in a reality where it did not belong. He needed to leave soon, while he still had enough strength to attempt it, while his heart could still handle the strain. But first he needed to understand what he was leaving behind. The pattern was clear now. This world was not unique. The Imperium controlled thousands of planets, perhaps millions, across a galaxy so vast that light took years to cross between stars. In that empire, worlds were resources, populations were assets. When corruption appeared, the response was systematic. Identify, assess, purge, no trials, no investigations, no attempts to separate the innocent from the guilty. The entire world was marked as contaminated. The entire population was eliminated. Efficient, thorough, absolute. And somewhere in some database, this world would be listed as a successful operation. Threat neutralized, sectors secured, resources available for reclamation once radiation levels decreased to acceptable thresholds. The 3 billion dead would not be named, would not be mourned, would not be remembered beyond the statistical entry in a report that no one would read. Just like the Kurta. Kurapika's hands tightened, his breathing accelerated. The parallel was too close, too precise. 47 people erased for profit. 3 billion erased for security. Different scales. Same mechanism, same forgetting. His eyes burned. No. He forced control. Steady breathing, relaxed muscles. The activation was beginning. He could feel it. The scarlet eyes responding to his emotional state. To the anger, the grief, the recognition. He could not allow it. His nen was too depleted, his heart too damaged. If Emperor Time activated now uncontrolled, it would kill him. Here, alone, in the dark. His eyes burned hotter. The control was slipping. His training, his discipline, his ability to separate emotion from response. all of it eroding under the weight of understanding, under the recognition that the forgetting was systematic, universal, endless. The scarlet eyes activated fully. Kurapika gasped, tried to force them closed, failed. The technique was engaging, his Nen system responding to the eye transformation, preparing for Emperor Time whether he wanted it or not. "Stop!" His voice was hoarse, desperate, talking to his own body, trying to override autonomic response with conscious will. His Nen did not listen. Emperor Time initiated. The activation was wrong, forced, incomplete. His power system was trying to engage all functions simultaneously, but the reserves were insufficient. The technique was cannibalizing his life force, burning through cellular energy, consuming bone marrow, destroying muscle tissue. His heart seized. Not metaphor, actual cardiac arrest. The electrical signals stopped. The muscle froze. For 2 seconds. 3. Then emergency systems kicked in. Adrenaline. Backup neural pathways. The heart restarted. Arrhythmic. Chaotic. But beating. Kurapika's vision went white. Pain beyond description. His entire chest was locked. Compressed. The ribs felt like they were collapsing inward. The pressure was immense, unsurvivable. And his Nen was destabilizing, not depleting, breaking down. The fundamental structure that allowed him to manipulate life energy was fragmenting, coming apart, the same way it had when he first arrived. Phase displacement, reality rejection, two frequencies trying to occupy the same space. Incompatible, destructive. His Nen was rejecting this universe. Again. Or this universe was rejecting him. The distinction did not matter. Physics made the only choice available. The transition was not gentle. His body convulsed. Every nerve fired simultaneously. His shoulder wound tore open. His leg wound reopened. Blood vessels ruptured. Internal bleeding began. Catastrophic. Fatal. The world dissolved. Not gradually, all at once. The darkness, the water, the facility, the dead planet. Everything became undefined, without form, without substance. Just the sensation of falling through space that was not space, through time that was not time. Kurapika's consciousness fragmented, scattered. He could not maintain coherence, could not hold his sense of self together, while reality itself became negotiable. His last thought was not fear, not regret, just recognition. He had failed to decide. His body had decided for him. Survival over choice, instinct over intention. His Nen had forced the displacement because remaining was death, and some part of him still wanted to live, even if living meant forgetting. The thought dissolved. He dissolved with it. Somewhere. Somewhen. Reality stabilized. A body materialized. Fell. Struck ground that was solid, real, consistent with the laws of physics that a human nervous system could comprehend. The body did not move, did not breathe. For 7 seconds. 8. Then a gasp. Shallow. Pained, automatic, a heartbeat, irregular, damaged, but functional. Kurapika existed again. He did not wake, did not open his eyes, did not regain consciousness. His body was operating on autonomic functions only. Breathing, heartbeat, cellular repair, attempting to address catastrophic damage. His mind was gone. Scattered across the displacement. It would reassemble. Eventually. Hours, days. If the body survived long enough, if infection did not claim him, if blood loss did not kill him, if his heart did not stop again. The ground beneath him was grass, not ash, living vegetation, growing in soil that was not irradiated, under a sky that was not the color of infection. He had returned, unintentionally, uncontrollably, without triumph or understanding or choice. Just displacement, again. The universe did not care about his intentions. It only cared about compatibility. And he was no longer compatible with the place he had been. The body lay still, breathing, bleeding, alive in the most technical sense, waiting for the mind to return, if it could. Consciousness returned in fragments, not all at once, piece by piece, like assembling a puzzle from scattered components. First sensation, pain, everywhere. Specific locations blurred into general agony. His shoulder, his chest, his leg, internal structures he could not name. Everything hurt. Second sound, wind through leaves, bird calls, distant, natural. Not the silence of a dead world, not the mechanical hum of failing infrastructure. Third awareness. He was lying on grass, real grass, growing, living. The ground beneath him was soft, organic, not metal, not ash. Fourth memory. The displacement, the cardiac arrest, the phase rejection, the dissolution. Kurapika's eyes opened. The sky above him was blue, clear. The sun was visible, yellow, normal. The kind of sky that existed in a universe where stars were distant and physics operated consistently. He was home. The thought did not bring relief, only recognition. He tried to move. His body refused. Not paralysis. Exhaustion so complete that voluntary muscle control was temporarily impossible. His nervous system had been overloaded by the displacement. It needed time to recalibrate. He waited, breathing carefully, assessing. His heart was beating, irregularly, skipping every 7th or 8th beat. The rhythm was wrong, but functional. The damage from Emperor Time was permanent. He could feel it, the scarred tissue, the dead zones in the muscle, the electrical pathways that misfired. His Nen was present, barely. The reserves were lower than they had ever been. Lower than during the Hunter exam, lower than after fighting Uvogan. The system had been stressed beyond design parameters. It was recovering, but slowly, inefficiently. And something else was wrong. Emperor Time was not fully disengaged, not active, but not dormant, sitting at the edge of activation, waiting, responding to his elevated heart rate, to the stress hormones in his bloodstream, to the residual trauma it wanted to activate. His body thought he was still in danger, still needed the enhancement. The technique was becoming automatic, reflexive, a threat instead of a tool. Kurapika forced his breathing to slow, forced his heart rate to decrease. Manual control over autonomic functions, a skill the Kurta had taught, a skill he had perfected during training. Emperor Time retreated, slightly, not far enough. If he lost control again, if his emotions spiked, if the scarlet eyes activated without permission, Emperor Time would engage, and his heart would fail. Permanently. He needed to be careful, needed to maintain emotional equilibrium, needed to avoid situations that would trigger the transformation, which meant avoiding the Phantom Troop. The realization settled over him like weight. He could not continue his hunt. Not directly, not with the same intensity, not if every confrontation risked involuntary activation. not if anger could kill him as surely as any enemy. His mission had not changed. The troops still needed to answer for what they had done, but his methods would have to adapt. Become more precise, more controlled, more surgical. No more sustained combat. No more pushing his limits. No more Emperor time unless absolutely unavoidable. And even then, it might kill him. Kurapika lay on the grass, staring at the blue sky, his body slowly regaining function, his mind processing the new limitations. He had survived. That was something. He had returned before the choice became impossible, before he became what he hunted. But the cost was higher than he had anticipated. Minutes passed. His fingers began responding. He flexed them slowly. Testing. The shoulder was stiff, infected. Would need proper medical attention. The leg was manageable. Healing. The internal damage he could not assess without equipment. He sat up. Slowly. The world tilted. Stabilized. He was in a forest clearing. Remote. The kind of place he chose when practicing Nen alone. When he needed isolation. His phone was in his pocket. Somehow undamaged. The screen showed the date. The time. 6 minutes had passed. He had been gone for hours. Days subjectively. Fighting. Bleeding. Nearly dying. Learning that genocide was policy in a universe where corruption was literal and extinction was mathematics. 6 minutes. The displacement had not been linear. Time had compressed or expanded or operated on rules that did not translate between realities. It did not matter. He was back. Minimal time lost. No one would have noticed his absence. No one would ask questions he could not answer. Kurapika stood, unsteady. His legs protested. He forced them to hold, to function. Walking would help. Movement would restore circulation. Would remind his body how to operate in normal gravity under normal physics. He took 3 steps before his vision blurred. Not injury, not exhaustion. His eyes were burning. No, not now. He had not thought about the troop, had not dwelled on the kurta, had not triggered the emotional cascade that activated the scarlet transformation. But his eyes did not care about his intentions. They were responding to residual trauma, to the accumulated stress, to the fact that his nervous system was still processing what he had witnessed. 3 billion dead. Systematic forgetting. Industrial genocide. The scarlet eyes activated. Kurapika gasped. Tried to force them closed. Tried to suppress the transformation. But the control was gone, damaged. The displacement had broken something fundamental in his ability to regulate the technique. Emperor Time began engaging. His heart stuttered. Missed 3 beats. 4. The scarred tissue was failing. The electrical signals were chaotic. He was seconds from cardiac arrest. Kurapika dropped to his knees, forced his consciousness inward, found the place where Nen originated, where intention became reality. He severed the connection, cut the flow, emergency shutdown. Emperor Time disengaged, violently. The backlash was immediate. His Nen reserves plummeted. His vision went dark, his body collapsed. But his heart restarted, weak, irregular, alive. He lay on the forest floor, breathing, waiting for his vision to return, for his nervous system to stabilize. The scarlet eyes faded slowly, reluctantly, as if they wanted to remain active, as if the transformation had become default instead of exception. Kurapika understood then, completely. He could not do this alone anymore. The realization was not weakness. It was mathematics. His body could not sustain the hunt. His power system was compromised. His heart was failing. One more episode like this, and he would die. Not in combat, not honorably, just collapsed in a forest, alone, forgotten. The Kurta would remain unavenged. The troop would continue operating. His mission would fail because his body had failed first, unless he changed, unless he accepted help, accepted limitations, accepted that precision meant knowing when to stop. Kurapika sat up again, slower this time. His heart was settling into its new damaged rhythm. His nen was stabilizing at a lower baseline. His eyes were gray again, normal, controllable for now. He needed to find his friends, needed to let them see that he had returned, needed to not explain where he had been or what he had learned, needed to be present without being honest. The thought was exhausting, but survival required compromise, and he had chosen survival over completion, had chosen to return before becoming what he hunted. Now he had to live with that choice. Kurapika stood, walked toward the edge of the clearing, his body protesting every step, his heart beating its broken rhythm, his mind carrying knowledge he could not share. He had seen a universe where forgetting was policy, where genocide was mathematics, where systems were too large to fight without becoming corrupted. And he had chosen to leave, not because he was weak, because he understood that some battles could not be won. Some systems could not be broken. Some costs were too high. The Phantom Troop was different, smaller, defeatable. He could still hunt them, still hold them accountable, still ensure the Kurta were remembered, but carefully, precisely, without Emperor time unless absolutely necessary, without dying alone in the process. He walked through the forest, toward civilization, toward his friends, toward a future that was narrower than before but still possible. Behind him, the clearing was empty. The grass where he had lain was crushed, blood-stained, evidence of displacement that no one would find. The universe had rejected him, sent him home, given him a second chance he had not earned. He would not waste it. Kurapika found them at the small cafe where they had agreed to meet. 3 days late. He had spent the intervening time in a clinic, under a false name, getting the shoulder treated, antibiotics, debridement, proper bandaging. The medical staff had not asked questions. Hunter licenses discouraged curiosity. Gon saw him first, waved. The gesture was enthusiastic, uncomplicated. Everything Kurapika was not. "You're late," Gon said as Kurapika approached the table. Not accusatory, observational. We were starting to worry. Kilua's eyes tracked Kurapika's movements, analytical, missing nothing, the slight stiffness in his left shoulder, the careful way he sat, the barely perceptible irregularity in his breathing. "You look terrible," Kilua said flatly. Leorio leaned forward, studied Kurapika's face with the attention of someone who had medical training and knew what to look for. His frown deepened. "When did you last sleep properly?" "Recently enough." That's not an answer. Leorio's hand moved as if to check Kurapika's pulse. Stopped halfway, uncertain whether the gesture would be welcomed. "You're thinner, paler. Something happened." Kurapika had prepared for this, had rehearsed deflections, practiced explanations that revealed nothing while appearing honest. But sitting here, looking at faces that showed genuine concern, the rehearsed words felt hollow. "I took a job," he said carefully. "It was more complicated than anticipated." What kind of job? Gon asked. Leaning forward, interested but not suspicious, Gon trusted. It was his default. Information gathering. It required going somewhere I was not prepared for. Kilua's eyes narrowed fractionally. Somewhere dangerous, somewhere different. The distinction was precise, deliberate. Kilua caught it. His expression shifted. Recognition. Understanding that Kurapika was choosing words with unusual care. That the evasion was intentional, necessary. Did you find what you were looking for? Kilua asked. The question was layered. Surface meaning simple. Subtext complex. Kurapika considered the question. Had he found what he was looking for? He had not been looking for anything. The displacement had been accident. But what he had found was understanding. Pattern recognition. The knowledge that some systems were too large to fight. That revenge had limits. That survival sometimes required choosing life over completion. No, he said finally. But I found something else. What? Gon asked. A boundary. The word hung in the air. Gon looked confused. Kilua looked thoughtful. Leorio looked concerned. What kind of boundary? Leorio pressed. The kind you recognize before crossing. The kind that tells you if you continue, you will not return as yourself. Silence settled over the table. The cafe continued operating around them. Other conversations, other lives. Normal, mundane, safe. Gon broke the silence first. But you came back. Yes. That's good, right? Gon's optimism was reflexive, automatic. He wanted it to be good. Wanted his friend to be okay. Wanted the complicated thing to have a simple resolution. Kurapika almost smiled. Almost. Yes, that's good. Kilua was not satisfied. What cost? The question was direct, clinical. Kilua understood prices, understood that crossing boundaries and returning was never free. That survival had expenses. Kurapika touched his chest lightly, over the heart. The gesture was brief, unconscious. I learned my limits. Limits can be expanded, Gon offered. Hopeful, encouraging. Some can, some cannot. Kurapika's hand lowered, rested on the table. Some limits are structural. Trying to exceed them does not make you stronger. It breaks you. Leorio's medical instincts were active now. Your heart, Kurapika did not answer directly. Did not need to. Leorio understood. Had seen the irregular breathing, the careful movements, the way Kurapika had touched his chest. The pieces assembled into diagnosis. You need to be careful, Leorio said quietly. Whatever you did, whatever happened, your body is telling you something. Listen to it. I am. Are you? Kilua's voice was sharp, not hostile, concerned masked as skepticism. Because listening would mean stopping, resting, not taking jobs that send you somewhere you are not prepared for. I stopped, Kurapika said. The words came out softer than intended. I recognized the boundary and I stopped. I came back. The confession surprised him. He had not meant to be that honest, had not meant to reveal that the choice had been close, that returning had been decision as much as displacement. Gon's expression shifted. The optimism remained, but was joined by something else. Understanding that was incomplete but genuine. You were really far away, weren't you? Yes. But you came back to us. Not a question, a statement. Gon needed it to be true, needed to believe that friendship mattered more than distance, than boundaries, than whatever Kurapika had been pursuing. Kurapika looked at Gon, at Killua, at Leorio, three people who had earned the right to be concerned, who had shared danger, who had proven their value not through utility, but through presence. "Yes," he said. "I came back." "Good." Gon smiled. Uncomplicated again. Problem solved as far as he was concerned. His friend had been gone. Now his friend was here. Everything else was details. "Then we should eat. You look hungry." Kurapika was hungry, had been burning calories faster than he could replace them. The medical treatment had helped, but his body still needed resources, needed rest, needed time. "I could eat," he admitted. Leorio flagged down a server, started ordering. Too much food, compensating for worry with excessive hospitality. Killua watched Kurapika, still analytical, still seeing more than was shown, but not pressing, accepting that some explanations would not come, that some experiences could not be shared. Gon was already talking. About his recent training, about a technique he was developing, about something Killua had said that was probably insult disguised as advice. The conversation flowed around Kurapika. Normal, grounding, human in scale. Kurapika listened, contributed occasionally, felt his heart beating its irregular rhythm, felt his nen reserves slowly rebuilding, felt the weight of knowledge he could not share settling into place, becoming part of his foundation rather than his focus. He had seen a universe where genocide was policy, where extinction was mathematics, where forgetting was systematic. But he had returned to a world where three people noticed his absence, where concern was genuine, where friendship existed without calculation. The scale was smaller. The stakes were personal. The boundaries were visible. And for the first time since the displacement, Kurapika felt his eyes remain gray. Calm, controlled. Not by force, by choice. The scarlet eyes did not activate. The transformation did not threaten. Emperor Time remained dormant. His body was responding to environment, to safety, to the presence of people who mattered. He was home, not just physically, contextually. In a world that operated on rules he understood. Among people who saw him as person rather than resource. In a moment that required nothing more than eating a meal and listening to friends. It was enough. For now, it was enough. The server brought food. Gon immediately started eating. Killua made a comment about Gon's table manners. Leorio defended Gon while simultaneously agreeing with Killua. The argument was familiar, comfortable, meaningless in the best way. Kurapika picked up his fork, began eating, slowly. His body was still adjusting, still healing, still carrying damage that would never fully repair, but he was here, present, choosing to be part of this moment rather than lost in the weight of what he had seen. The boundary had been recognized. The path had been rejected. The choice had been made. And Kurapika was still himself, damaged, limited, changed, but himself. The cafe continued its operations. The city moved around them. The world continued turning. Unaware that someone at a small table had returned from a place where worlds burned, where billions died, where forgetting was protocol, unaware and uncaring, as it should be. Some knowledge was not meant to be shared. Some experiences existed only as internal markers, boundaries recognized, paths not taken. Kurapika ate, listened, existed in the small moment. Let the larger pattern fade into background. Not forgotten, never forgotten, but placed in perspective. He had survived. He had returned. He had chosen. Everything else was consequence, and consequences could be managed. One day at a time, one meal at a time, one heartbeat at a time, even if the rhythm was wrong, even if the cost was permanent. He was still here, and that mattered.